Thank you. And thank you for the invite to come and present and share some of our work in rugby. So the background to this talk is from a sports science perspective, so how we can better support coaches and athletes to perform at a higher level. Now, the flow of the talk will talk around why we do what we do, how we do it, and then what we do. And I think for the start of this talk, there's parts of it that sound like they should happen, but actually they don't. And actually there are genuine challenges between science and coaches and practice. So I'm really unique in the fact that I'm unlucky, in the fact that I have different roles within a university as a researcher, within a national governing body looking after their research and innovation, and then within professional clubs looking after their sports science and science on the ground. So hopefully this gives a background around how we can actually apply the different contexts in terms of the science and the research to the day-to-day practices and challenges, to actually a sports strategy, to actually align those requirements to hopefully optimize research in practice. So if we start with why. Now, I did my PhD, finished 4 years ago. My PhD was actually in basic science, so looking at biochemistry of the body and fluids and electrolytes. And I was working in sport at the same time. And after 4 years of studying, a 100,000-word dissertation, where we'd looked at different fluid shifts between different compartments, I went into the club one day really excited to share what I'd actually found with the coaches. And the findings of my work were that following exercise, that rugby players should drink when they're thirsty. Of which coaches looked at me and walked away. And for me, that was a genuine light bulb moment of the science that we're doing in the laboratories and in the universities, despite it being good quality science, may not apply to the real world. And if it doesn't apply to the real world, then actually that creates a bridge and a gap between what could happen in practice and also what could happen in science. And this is common, and it's been recently quoted that sports science research is out in orbit, it's in space, because it doesn't fit with the real world. And the real world challenges are that staff and coaches are busy, they're under pressure, they're working with athletes who have their own unique requirements. So actually we need to start looking at a way in which we can bring sports science research back down from space, back to Earth, and actually apply it in the real world and apply it in clubs and organizations to hopefully advance performance. So to do that, I'm going to tell you a story, and hopefully that's right. The start of the story is that actually when you think about research and practice, they both fundamentally have the same aims. They want to find out new knowledge to apply to sport, to make things better, people run faster, sport safer. And from that logic, it makes sense of why it should work. Except what happens is, as research becomes a little bit older and practice becomes a little bit older, practice starts playing with things, and research starts focusing on specific things. And then what happens, unfortunately, is that practice just randomly chooses different things it wants to do on a day-to-day, and research becomes obsessive. And actually what you generally get, unfortunately, is you get a breakup. And research and practice generally fall out of love because one person's overly complicated and one person's overly needy. And at the moment, there's even in some organizations, there's such a disconnect that universities aren't working with clubs and clubs aren't working with universities, which makes no sense when they're both supposedly doing the same thing. And the other part from a research perspective is that if we go with the love story theme, every time that we find something out as a researcher and as a scientist, we share our love letters in journals that nobody reads and nobody subscribes to unless you're in a university. So in terms of the cycle of doing research to help sports performance and sport progress, there's actually some key fundamental flaws in the process. So hopefully we'll look at ways in which we can get past that. And I think that it always comes down to money. And actually, research is expensive. And I think if you use these three words of good, cheap, and fast, but you can only have two, I think that sums up where sports science research may be at the moment.
But I would challenge that and actually zoom in on two things. I would zoom in on good and also cheap. And I would challenge good in terms of whose good is it? Is it good science? Therefore, it advances our knowledge in universities, but it's hard to apply. And in terms of value, what does somebody get from it? Now, I guarantee if you're working for a sports club and I came to you and said, can I have some money to tell you why your athletes drink when they're thirsty? You'd probably say no. So despite that being low cost, it's probably low value. And this is also an interesting part from science. And the Dunning-Kruger effect looks at how the relationship between our competence and our confidence. So when we don't know something or we have little competence, we have high confidence. And then as we start to understand something more, our confidence decreases until we become experts. Now in research, what we generally do is we find something out. We find something new, and because we want people to use it in sport, we go and tell everyone about it. And then what happens? We tell you why it doesn't work. And we tell you all the reasons that it doesn't work in science. So actually, in terms of this dialogue between research and practice, it's hard and it's a challenge to actually optimize the flow of information and knowledge. So looking at this simply, you can look at efficacy and effectiveness. Efficacy from our work with GPS devices would be whether the reliability of those microtechnology devices is good and whether they're valid. Effectiveness would be, do they work in sport? My first experience of using GPS in sport was when I was working in football. And I spoke to the head coach and I said, we want to get some GPS devices. And he looked at me and he said, great idea. I'd like to know where the players are when they're not here. So that for us is our effectiveness, because that's the person that's making the choices, the decisions, and in effect deciding how and when we train. So I think you can make that more simple and less scientific and just call it, are we doing knowledge generation or knowledge application research? And I think if you look at the sports science literature, the majority is knowledge generation, and we need more knowledge application. So think about that as the car. So the car is our knowledge, and the car has progressed from what is in effect a vehicle which may not be as efficient as what we have now, which is a faster car. So our knowledge is great, but this is our road, and this is our knowledge application. So if our road isn't fit to apply the knowledge that we have in the university and the science, then actually maybe we should challenge how we're doing and applying research at the moment. So in terms of how, I think that the how is the first thing, is understanding why the process. And the process of research is simple. It's creating a research question. You then recruit participants, you then collect your data, analyze your data, and you publish your data. And that's the traditional scientific process. But fundamentally, there's some flawed concepts in that to make the most of what we're doing at the moment. The first one is around the question: who creates the question? So if we can co-construct the question, we can develop the question between research and practice. That makes sense. And actually, a lot of the knowledge that we know at the moment is based on sub-elite athletes. The reason they're sub-elite athletes is nobody wants to give researchers time with their players because the time is valuable. But actually, if we go back to the question and we challenge ourselves on, will the findings be useful or interesting, then that may allow access to more elite participants. Because the people that are coming up with the questions are the people that want to know the answers. Therefore, our science is now done on real-world practice. Therefore, we can apply it. And then we need to look at how we share it, acknowledging that people don't read scientific journals because they're busy, they're coaches, and that's not where their expertise are. And then we also need to then try and apply that research back into practice. And if it doesn't work, that's fine, but we consider why within our next question. And this flow of information then allows research and practice to go through the research process together and learn from the process as well as from the actual findings of research.
Now, the challenge to the co-construction of questions is innovation, because sometimes we don't know what we want. So actually, this is where sometimes we can go to space and we can look at things from a broader concept, and actually we can do different things. So the quote of Henry Ford, if he'd have asked people what they wanted, they'd have said faster horses. So we do need to challenge things, but actually at a way in which they can eventually be applied. So if we go back to our relationship counsellor with our two parties, one of which is needy and one's complicated, this is how we actually how we overcome that and what it looks like now in the real world for us. So they should kiss. They should keep it simple. If they keep the research simple, then it applies more. And that allows the coach and the athletes and all the support staff to use this and enhance performance. And actually, they should talk more. If you spend time with people in professional clubs, coaches, or performance staff, it's scary how little dialogue they have with people in universities, and vice versa. So we need to look at how we can then get people to communicate better. And the reality is that there is a gap between the two, and there always will be a gap between research and practice because they're different things. But when you look at where they can work together, practice has questions, has so much data that at times it struggles to analyze, and researchers have expertise and they have ideas. So we need to look at a way in which we can bring this together. And I think that the two things that I always find myself stuck between is in practice, without data, I'm another person with an opinion, so I need to have evidence to inform change. But in research, not everything that can be counted counts, and not everything that counts can be counted. We do research, find something, and the team still wins. And we need to acknowledge that the coach actually has the freedom to do what they want and wear a support mechanism behind. So the way in which we've overcome this is we've developed what we would say is a research practitioner, and we've joint appointed between universities and organisations somebody to sit between both. And that person offers context of the challenges, the insights, the unique challenges of that sport. And actually this person can act as a filter between the coach who's trying to work quickly, the scientist who's trying to work fast. And actually this takes away the challenges of having to read scientific journals because they can discuss things over coffees. And actually that's how, from a behaviour change, the nudges, we actually then progress practice. And we've done this on a virtual level now with lots of different clubs across the UK who now share data. They share data with each other because actually the data isn't where the knowledge is, it's what we do with the data. And we've also done work now with Catapult, where all the rugby league clubs use Catapult. That all feeds back into a central system. And we can answer slow questions on that, while also then while also supporting the clubs to advance and develop their practice. And relatively speaking, it is successful. It's economical. It's cheaper because you have two people paying one person's salary. People have access to data they didn't have before. People get access to questions they didn't know were there before. And actually, the expertise then shares across this model. So to finish, to bring it back to sport, I'm just going to show you a video of the 2015 Leeds Rhinos, so Rugby League, when they won all of the 3 competitions. And this is where the majority of our research takes place. Them winning is not because of us, it's because of the coaching, but we are a support mechanism behind them.
It's been a long day without you, my friend, and I'll tell you all about it when I see you again. We've come a long way from where we began. Oh, I'll tell you all about it when I see you again. When I see you again.
Damn, who knew? All the planes we flew, good things we've been through. That I'll be standing right
right here talking to you about another path. I know we love to hit the road and laugh, but something told me that it wouldn't last. Had to switch up, look at things different, see the bigger picture. Those were the days, hard work forever pays. Now I see you in a better place. How can we not talk about family when family's all that we got? Everything I went through, you were standing there by my side, and now you gon' be with me for the last ride. It's been a long day without you, my friend, and I'll tell you all about it when I see you again. We've come a long way, from where we began. Oh, I'll tell you all about it when I see you again. When I see you again. First you both go out your way and the vibe is feeling strong, and what's small turn to a friendship turn to a bond, and that bond will never be broken, the love will never get lost. And when brotherhood come first, then the line will never be crossed. Established it on our own when that line had to be drawn, and that line is what we reach, so remember me when I'm gone. How can we not talk about family when family's all that we got? Everything I went through, you were standing there by my side, and now you gon' be with me for the last ride. Let the light guide your way, yeah. Hold every memory as you go, and every road you take will always lead you home. Oh, it's been a long day without you, my friend, and I'll tell you all about it when I see you again. We've come a long way from where we began. Oh, I'll tell you all about it when I see you again. When I see you again. Come a long way from where we began. Oh, I'll tell you all about it when I see you again. When I see you again.
That's it. Thank you.